Hi, and welcome back to this edition of the Indusoft Web Studio video training series. In today's video, we're going to cover the grid object and just what that is. The grid object is an object that allows us to read and write to a lot of different tabular data sources. And what does that mean? That could be a text file, a CSV file, a class tag, could be even a database. So similar to the kind of format that you might find in a spreadsheet, yet very different. It's an object that allows us to view and read and write information to these different types of tabular data sources. And what we're going to cover in this video is the different data sources that are selectable from the grid object. We're going to start off with the class tag. We're going to move into the text file. And I'm going to talk a bit about database, but we're not going to cover that in this video. We're going to cover that in the databases video in a later video series. We're going to talk about selecting columns, conditional filtering and what you can view on the grid object, and inserting new information using the grid object. So let's get started. Over here in Indusoft Web Studio in our training project, we've been building on a foundation project that we started some time ago. Set up some navigation, a header screen, and kind of a template screen that we start with. So what I did before we got started is I opened up the template screen and I saved it as grid. That'll give us the right spacing, positioning, coloring, so on and so forth. I also opened up the navigation screen and copied this button down, changed the text on the button, and then I changed the screen that it goes to. I'm going to close that. One of the other things that I did before I got started with this video is I created in my project folder, so here's the IWS training folder that we've been working with, I created two different bitmaps. I created these little 16 by 16, a little check mark that I'm labeling as yes.bmp, and then I created an X as no.bmp, which we'll use eventually in the project. It doesn't have to be these names. It can be any graphic that you're interested in. I'm just doing these as an example. So pull this back off screen. And let's see. Okay, as we get started, the grid object itself is found here under data objects. Now, my screen resolution is a little bit reduced, so you may actually see these spread apart in your development environment. So we're going to put a grid object here on the screen. I'm going to make it roughly this size. We don't need a very large one. I can just spread that out just a bit. And I'm going to double click on it. And in here we can see the different data sources that we have available to us. And I'm going to choose class tag to get going. Ignore this bottom one. That's you'll never see that in one of your products. But text file, class tag, and database are the three choices that you have. I'm going to start off with class tag. When I choose class tag, then I need to go to data source settings. And you can see here that the data source settings lets us choose the class tag that we go to. If I was to change this to a text file, then that menu changes, or the dialog box changes, so we can choose the text file that we're going to, which we'll get to that in just a moment. So again, I'm going to go to class tag here and set up the data source settings. Well, I haven't set up my class tag yet that I want for this, so let's get started doing that. Let's back out of this and let's go into our global settings here under classes, and we haven't really set up a class tag yet. We talked about it in the tags video, but I'm going to right click here and insert a class, and we're going to give this a name. Now this class, so we can differentiate it, we're going to put a lowercase c in front of it, and that's optional. You don't have to do that. That does not specify that it's a class or anything like that. Just going to make it a little bit easier for me to find later on. And I'm going to call this OEE, as in Overall Equipment Effectiveness. OEE is a pretty popular term now for production monitoring and again, overall equipment effectiveness. I'm going to just insert that as a class, and what that's going to do is open up the class tag editor, and it's going to let me put in the values here. So I'm going to start off, we're going to put in machine name, and the name of the machine is going to be held by a string, so I'm going to change that to a string type here. And then we're going to have uptime, and maybe that would be in minutes, so an integer value is okay for that. And then downtime, and also again an integer value would be okay for that. So you can see I can mix and match different tag types within the class tag itself. So I'm going to go ahead and close this. And now we haven't really used that class yet, so I have to go back into my project tags under Datasheet View. I'm going to scroll down here to the bottom, and I'm going to tell it that we're going to create a tag called OEE, and it will have, since we're going to do 3 different machines, let's say, we're going to have a size array of 2. So that'll be index 0, 1, and 2, or a total of 3 different machines. And the type is no longer going to be integer. I'm going to change that to be the class that we just created. See, that's where the little C comes in place of that. So I know that's a class called OEE that has those elements that we created just a moment ago. So we can see here that the square brackets have appeared. That denotes that it's an array. And so now I have a tag called OEE with a COEE type, or class OEE type. I'm going to go ahead and close that. And now what I'm going to do is go back into the grid object and tell it that the data source settings, the class tag is going to be that OEE tag that we created, that array that we just created. And we're going to tell it that it has 3 items. And the view field here is optional. We can show that, and I'll come back and do that in a moment, but we're going to leave this as empty for now because it is optional. We can show the values. We'll come back to that. So now that I have the data source settings pointing to that class tag, the OEE class tag, I'm going to go ahead and click on columns, and this will denote what comes into the grid object. Now the label field here, the label column, is what gets listed as on the top of the header here. And so we're in the class tag, we created machine name, so maybe we don't want to spell that all the way out, so we'll just call this machine and abbreviate that. Now the member that it points to inside of that class tag, we do need to spell this out directly. Now there are some circumstances, and you can look in the help, if you don't put a member in here, it will try to match up the label with a member inside of your data source. In this case, since I'm trying to show the differentiation between the two, I've not spelled out machine name in the label field, therefore it would not be able to find that. So here I'm going to have to do machine name in this field, and that'll point it to that first item, first member within the class tag. Here we will add uptime, and put that in here. Now, something else to note is since machine name is text, we're going to match that type, and just since this was defaulted to text. Now, uptime, because I made that an integer, I'm going to need to change this to numeric. We have the choice of text, numeric, picture, and checkbox. In this case, I'm going to leave that as numeric. And then downtime. Downtime in here. And we'll also change this to numeric as well. Okay, so now we've set up those columns. We can adjust the width and the alignment and whether or not they allow input, and if there's a key on the keyboard that allows it. If there's formatting and units, and the units will come from the tag properties if you put that in there. Click on OK here. And so now we can see that we have machine, uptime, and downtime. I'm going to spread that out just a little bit more so we can make sure we get all that information there. And at this point, I don't have any data in that class tag. So let's just use our database spy to show how to get data in there, and it'll help us illustrate a couple of other points. So I'm going to put in here the information that I want in that class tag. So I'm going to start out by double-clicking on this field and choosing the OEE tag. Now, if you take a look up here in the Object Finder, we've got a couple of buttons that we haven't used yet. Now, this will allow us to choose the index and the member within that OEE tag. So let's do this. Let's build this as we go. So now that we've chosen that OEE class tag, I can click on index, and the first one, or element 0, or index 0, I'm going to choose from this list. And then the member within that, now it dives into that, and these are part of the class tag that we created. I want to choose machine name. So we can see that it's built that tag name for us with the array and the dot and the machine name, it's built that out for us. We haven't had to do any typing. So I click on OK here. Maybe in here I'll put machine A. And now I want to go ahead and do the remainder of those, which I could pick from the list the way that I just did, or probably a little bit easier is I can hit Control C and hit Control V, and we can see that that's reading from those tag values. And I'm going to change this to element 1 and element 2 here. And here I'll make machine B and machine C. So now I have 3 values in the machine column here. Now we need to do uptime and downtime. So let's go build from that list again. I'm going to click off of this cell and then double click on this cell. That'll open up the object finder. We're going to choose OEE again. Click on index. We'll start at 0 here. And then choose the member. And here's going to be uptime. And click on OK. And we're just going to put some random numbers in here just so we can get some value. So in here I'll do 11 and copy this and paste and paste. And we'll change the index to 1 and 2. And we'll put some values in here of maybe 22 and 33. And look at that, I didn't change this, so I'll leave this as, change this to 2. I'll go back in here and change that to 22 and 33. Okay, now we'll need to do the same thing with downtime. Let me expand out the database SPI for just a moment here. Go ahead and again pick from the list, OEE, and try that again. Double click here, or get rid of that. Come back in here, double click, OEE, index 0. Now I've been choosing just the index as a raw number. That can be a tag, which we could pull from our tag list, but in this case we just want to use the number. So say OK, and member, this one will be downtime, say OK, and again we'll get started by copying those down. Now these values I'm just inputting from database SPI to simulate. These would probably come from a PLC or some other place within your runtime, not necessarily being typed in manually from database SPI. So here I'll do 44, 55, and 66 just so we can see those. So now we have 9 different values for machine uptime and downtime in that class tag. That class tag should be OEE, which was chosen here from the database SPI. It shows we have 3 items, and the columns we set up here to read that different type of data. So at this point we should be able to very easily close the screen and save it, run our project, and quite simply we get that information in our grid object. Now we can set up different color schemes and fonts and things of that nature, and I'll show you where some of that is. But some of the next steps that we're going to go to is back here on the screen, on the grid screen. Covered in the advanced is where we're going to go next, but I wanted to point out the different odd versus even line colors, the highlight colors, whether or not this is disabled or security. Those are all configured in here. So now let's go here under advanced. Now the user enable, very similar to a couple of the objects that we had. I think it was the list box allows us to choose user enable or control enable or disable. I might have that object wrong, but we covered that in a previous video where if this field is enabled either with a constant like this with a 1 or we put a tag in here, we can turn on or off the ability for a user to select with a mouse or a touch screen. So maybe this is a read-only object and display-only object. We don't want any user input. We would either set this to false or disable this with a tag. The number of rows is reported back into a tag in here, and that will list how many rows of data we actually have in here. And if you have selected an individual row, the tag in this field will report back what row number you're on. This is both a read and write tag capability here. So if you write into the value of this tag, it will move the selected line to that individual line. So let's go ahead and add a way to do this and see if we can't get some information out of this, or how to choose information. So here I'm just going to create a new tag called number of rows, or num rows. And again, this will report back to us how many rows. Since this is going to be just an integer number, I'm going to just leave this as integer. Click on OK here. And oops, what did I do? Let's go back here to row number. We'll call that row num. And that also will be an integer. So I'm just going to click on OK. And say OK here. And then go back here. And let's see. We're going to create some different ways to manipulate these. So what we're going to do is we're going to let the object tell us how many rows it has, what its maximum row number is, and then we're going to change the row number and allow it to point to that. So before we get really too far down this path, let's show the basic concept of this by here putting a text object on the screen, and this will be row number, and I'll put a single pound sign in there since we're not going to add more than a few lines. You might want more digits if you want to go higher than 10 lines. Here I'm going to go under properties, and I'm going to create a text data link, and I'm going to tie it to that tag that we just created, which is row num. And eventually I might want this as an input enabled. That's not necessarily true for all projects, but in this case, to show you how that works, I'm going to input enable this. And now we can save it and run. And when I do that, you can see that right now it shows that we're on row number 1. And if I select this, it's selectable because that user enable is enabled. I can select this with either my mouse or a touch screen, and that row number reports back the row number that we are on. Now it is also an input object, and that row number is a writable tag. So let's say I want to direct this to go back to line 1. I can put a 1 in here and hit enter, and that'll drive that to 1. Now that also could be driven by a PLC value, a database value, or some other value from OPC or from wherever you want to get that data to allow it to drive the line that this object is currently on. Let's create some quick navigation here to show you how we might want to do that and how we can interact with these two values here under advanced with num rows and row num. So again, the num rows reports back to us how many or the maximum row number is on that. So what we're going to do is create a couple of buttons here, one that allows us to navigate up and one that allows us to navigate down. So I'm going to remove the text from here, and we could do this in numerous ways, but I'm just going to put a little closed polygon on here and a little triangle on here, and close that, fill that up, and kind of center that a bit. Since I'm off by an odd number of grids, what I'm going to do is use the format, align center, get that all centered up. And now I'm going to go back into the button. Now I could group those. There's numerous ways to do that, but just to keep this easy, I'm going to go back into the button and apply a command animation to this button. Now here in the expression field, we're going to use an if statement. And I know we haven't covered some of the scripting, but I'll explain this to you as we go. What we're going to do is we're eventually going to write to the row number tag that will dictate what line we go to on the grid object. And how we're going to build this into an expression, since we don't want to go below 1 in the minimum value, we're going to use an if statement to determine where we're at and what our choices are. So we're going to use if, and then we're going to put our conditional statement inside of parentheses. And inside the parentheses, the way that this if statement works is we have the conditional statement. In this case, we're going to use the row number tag, row num. And if row num is greater than 0, then it will allow us to subtract 1 from itself. So row num, and it will allow us to go down to 1. I should do this actually, as long as its row number is greater than 1, meaning 2, then it'll allow us to drop down to the position number 1. So let's try this, and the else statement is going to be just replace it with itself, row num. Now, let me go back through and describe this. So if row number is greater than 1, it will allow us to subtract 1. So let's say we're on line 2, it'll allow us to subtract 1 and then write that value into itself, and then thus going back down to line 1. If it's not greater than 0, then it will just replace it with itself. I'm sorry, greater than 1. So if it's on 1, then it will just write to itself. We could essentially put a 1 in here or use the current row number. Either way will work. So now that we have that, we're going to copy this button down since it's almost configured for the opposing way. I'm going to click on that polygon. I'm going to use the format, and under rotate, I'm going to flip that vertical so it'll invert that. And here on the button, we need to do something slightly different. So here under row number, we're going to compare it to the number of rows that we have that the object reports back to us. So as long as we're less than the number of rows, then we want to add one more to it. And unless we're at the maximum number of rows, then we're just going to write back to itself so that it keeps that same value in there. So this should allow us to navigate up and down in this line. It should be, let's see, cancel. So this is something that you need to understand what's happening. It noticed that numRow is not a valid tag. I think I used numRows. So it's asking us, since I told it not to create that as a tag, it says, do you want to set this expression as a comment? Now what this is, I'm going to say yes, and what it's done is it's put 2 slashes in here. This is a convenience mechanism so that you don't lose everything that you just typed. It commented out even though it doesn't understand everything in there. So I'm going to get rid of the comments. I'm going to put what I think is the correct tag in there, numRows, and now when I hit enter, it accepts that. I'll go back into my datasheet view just so that I can make sure that the numRows is what I had. I want to make sure that I didn't create another tag accidentally that was different. So that's okay. So we should be able to now navigate, say yes, or close this screen, run the project, and navigate to our screen here. Click on the grid. Now you can see numRow, row number, is 1. We can use this button here to navigate down to 2, navigate down to 3, or I can go back down and I get to 1, and no matter how many times I click, it's just rewriting over itself because of that if statement. Same thing when I get back up to the top here. I'm comparing it against the maximum number of rows that I have, so it will not go any higher than that. So there's some quick navigation if you want to add that, and also showing you the beginnings of the Indusoft scripting language and logic and how that can be used. So what can we do with that? There is here on the grid object, under Advanced, there's a Selected Values. What that means is it's going to report back the values in the row that we created that we have selected on that individual line selected. So we're going to create a new tag here called Grid Values. And this, it doesn't exist, and we're going to create this as an array of 3. That'll be 2, so it'll be a total of 3. And we're going to create this as a string so that it can report not only the numerical values but the string values as well. It does not have to be a string. It'll try to adjust to the different types of data that you have, but string is going to be the most forgiving because it'll allow strings and integers and reals and Boolean all into it. And we could then use scripting commands to parse that apart and deal with it. So right now I'm going to choose string, and if I click on OK here, down here in the database SPI, I'm going to then add that grid values tag and put element or index 0 and copy this and change these indexes to 1 and 2. And right now I don't have any values because I'm not running, but when I click on run, and let's say we choose line 3 here, or machine C, which would be 33 and 66. I can come back here and see that I've gotten those values into that tag. I can see machine C, 33 and 66. Let's go back and run this again. I can move down to another line, go back into my database SPY, and now I can see that it's machine B 22 and 55, so that grid values tag gets loaded up with whatever line item we're on. So that's how that works. Go back in here, and under advanced, we can also put a filtering command in here, and this is very similar to SQL commands that will allow you to format how this gets filtered. So let's take a look at the help system here, give you some ideas. I'm going to just click on the context sensitive help, click on the object properties, and scroll down to the advanced dialog. And here under the condition field, we're going to see that the condition field builds based on this column operator value syntax. So for example, column X greater than 200, then it will filter and show only those where column X is greater than 200. So we have some expressions. You can see here that it's formatted just like a SQL where statement. And using some of these ideas and concepts, we can build into wildcards. We can use asterisks and question marks to replace either unlimited number of characters or single characters, and comparing that to database functionality as well. Now what I'm going to do here is use a filter that would allow us to filter out machine name, and give you an example. If machine column, actually what did I call that column? I called it MACH period. The MACH period column is greater than machine A, and that has to be in single quotes. A, close single quote. So if that column name, and here's the operator, is greater than machine A, then it will display. So now when I run this, we can see that I should probably stop and restart. Go in here, and it's not finding that. So let's go try to troubleshoot why real quick. It might be because of my machine name tag, or how did I call that column? Let's get rid of the period in that, just to see if that's probably driving this problem here. We'll just call that MACH, and then our filtering command, we'll just call that MACH. Okay. Yes, run. Then the grid object. Okay. So there we go. So the fact that it's greater than, and that's not right. So I'm just going to go ahead and pause this video and then come back. Alright, so I paused the video for a second because I was getting some unexpected results, at least unexpected by me, but they're explainable. So let's walk through this. So I'm only seeing machine B here. Now, when I put in my conditional statement under here under advanced, it says anything greater than machine A. So I expected to see machine B and C, because alphabetically they're greater than machine A. And what I forgot about is that I have to go in here and toggle this reload tag. We haven't created that yet, so I'm just going to create a tag called reload and click on OK. It does not exist. I'm going to make that a Boolean. Click on OK and put a button off here to the side. Now you don't have to do this with a button, and you don't have to do this manually. This could be done whatever mechanism you have changing the data in here could force this tag to reload or toggle. And for example, at the end of a shift, or at the end of downloading new data, or you could even put something in here that's repeatable, like the seconds clock, or something that would cause it to refresh every few minutes, or something like that. You might want to set up a scheduler worksheet to drive that. We'll talk about that in a later video. What I'm going to do here is just manually toggle the reload tag. And let's see, here it is. And now when I run this screen, the filtering command is in here, and I hit reload, and now I reload the data from the source based on those filtering commands. That's important to understand. So whether this is coming from a text file or a tag, a class tag in this case, or even a database, whenever you make certain changes, you will need to reload on that. So here we can see that that filtering command has filtered out anything and showing greater than machine A. So let's go get rid of that. Now we can put inside of this string tag with curly brackets in here, so we can change the filtering during runtime and maybe add different buttons that'll allow us to see different filters in that as well. So that's what that shows. Another thing, back here under the data source settings, when we configured this as the class tag OEE, I kind of skimmed over this view. If I put in a tag in here, we'll call this grid view, and that doesn't exist. If we toggle that tag, I'll make that Boolean as well, and kind of a similar to this reload button. I'll copy this button over here, and we'll tie it to grid view. We could call that maybe column select. Maybe we'll put this on the button. Because what that does is during runtime allows us to choose which columns we view here. So if I click on OK, save that, or click on close that screen, save it, and run. Now here we can choose column select, and maybe we want to choose just the machine and the uptime. So we'll get rid of downtime. We'll move that over to here. Click on OK, and the downtime goes away. So we can have a very flexible view into this with the conditional statements and adding and remove columns during runtime. Let's go back here, back into the grid object, and let's see. Here under Advanced, we also have the ability to print to the default printer. We toggle a tag that's in here, it'll print to the default printer that's connected to that PC. And in a similar fashion, if we toggle the tag that's in the PDF trigger field, we will then print to this PDF file name that you can build up using strings or just hard code in here as well. Some different options that we have to show in here are the show the header, which is this top column, on top row, I should say. We can enable slider or resize, which will give us sliders or scroll bars when we get beyond the size of the object itself, showing grid lines in the background, enabling translation for that object. And we haven't talked about the picture yet. Also, what I'd like to do is something while I paused the video a second ago, I figured something else out. When at first I had the column names and I had this as abbreviated with a period, there is certain times when the labels, the column names may have spaces in them, and one of the things that it says in the help is that we can put square brackets around a label that has spaces in it. And what it was doing is it was having problems with that period there. So when I had put in the conditional statement machine period and then greater than machine A, C-H-I-N-E, A, close, it didn't care for that period. So let's see what we can do. Say yes, run. It gave us no data in here because it couldn't find the machine period. So what we could have done is come into here and change this statement to put square brackets around that and still keep that period in there. And now it will treat that as an entire entity there, including the period. And now when I save this and run, we'll see the information. We can hit reload and get all that information. So that's why the with the period didn't work, is it was hanging up on that period. There wasn't characters there. Okay, so let me go get rid of that conditional statement out of there now. So we'll eventually be able to see all of our data. And now let's go back in and make a couple of changes. So here under columns, I'm going to now change the downtime column. Instead of being numeric, I'm going to change this to a checkbox. Now when I click on OK and run this, you'll see that instead of data, now I get checkboxes. Now these can be Boolean, so it's either on or off, or checked or not checked. So let me maybe check the first and the third of these and go back into my development environment. You can see here in the downtime, you can see that I've selected. Actually, it's probably better to do this without having put other values in there at first. You'll see what'll happen. This will show you something here in a second. So I've written ones to those values. Let me go back into here and check and uncheck that again. Now go back, and now we see that it's 0 in that space as well. So the check marks turn it into a Boolean value. Alternatively, we can go in here, and under the columns we can set this up as pictures. So when we do that as a picture, I'm going to need to change that data type. Now let's go see how to change that data type. I'm going to go here under Global, and I'm going to go under the classes that we created under COEE and go to the datasheet view for that. Now here under downtime, instead of being integer, I'm going to turn this into a string so it can accept the name of the picture that we want to display there. So if you remember that when I first started this, I had created this no.bmp and yes.bmp, and I put them in our project folder. Just a good thing to note, when you're eventually doing web stuff, you will probably want those pictures in your web subfolder so that they can be found. Close that. Let's go back into our development environment here. And here now in downtime, maybe I can put yes.bmp, then I'll put no.bmp, and yes.bmp again. And now when I run this, you should see the pictures in those locations instead of data. So that's a way that you can change either kind of thumbs up, thumbs down, maybe a picture of a product. I have seen people use the grid object for recipe management, for production, for security management, and maybe something that could be done here would be to show a picture of a person as you're adding or deleting or removing them from the security. So we can go ahead and exit this and go back into the grid object. And also here under advanced, you'll notice that here under advanced there are some items that are grayed out, and they're not available in this case when the data source is the class tag. So now let's go change this, or maybe copy this down, or let's even just start fresh. I'll copy with another grid object. I'll start, not copy, I should say. I'll insert another grid object. And here I'm going to change the source file to be a text file, and eventually I'll need to give it the name of that text file. Well, I haven't created that yet, but note here that it can set up different delimiters, and I'm going to have a comma with no space. Now this could be a CSV file saved from Excel, or in this case I'm just going to create a raw comma delimited text file. And probably the easiest way that I have to do that, I'm going to save this and run my project again. And since I have icons up here for Notepad, just launch Notepad from here. So very similar. I'm going to have machine A, comma, and then I'll put in some different values in here, maybe 456, comma, 789. Machine B, 123, do 987. C, no space there. 333, 444, and we'll even create a fourth line in here. D, and some different values. 222. Let's create even another one. We'll do 1221. Go ahead and save this as, and we'll save this in our, let's see here, my training structure here. Let me do this offline. Let me come back, and we'll go into our training folder here that is under IWS 7.1. Go into our training folder. We'll save it right here into our root, and we'll save this as grid text.txt. Save that. Now I'll close this text file here and go back into our second grid object down below here, And here under data source settings, now I'll choose that from my list. Now this is going to point into the screen subfolder. Since I saved that in the root of my project, I'll have to back up here and choose that gridtext.txt. And again, that was comma delimited. I'll say OK. And now we'll go back in here, under columns and configure machine. And notice this is text type. We'll configure uptime. And that's numeric. And downtime, that's also numeric. Say OK. And let's see, do we have to do anything else? Notice here that we have those fields now are available now that we're not on the class tag. I think we're OK for now, just for the quick demonstration of this. Say OK. Run. Now you can see we're reading out of that text file. I can go in and change, let's say here on the uptime for machine A, I change this to 1111, hit enter. Now if I go back into that text file, let's go ahead and go File, Open. I open that text file back up. You can see that it has written to that text file, so that it is changeable. It is bidirectional. Let's go ahead and close that. And so that's as simple as the text data source can be. Let's go here under Advanced and do just a little bit more. So let's talk about here the insert values and the insert trigger. So I had created back on the class tag data source this selected values, and I use these grid values here. Let's say that I want to create something similar with this, but now I want to use that as an insert. So I'm going to use grid values as the name of my tag, grid values, and an insert trigger. I haven't created that tag yet, so I'm just going to make that a Boolean. And now I have to have some kind of triggering mechanism. Well, I have a toggle up here that's reload. I'm just going to copy this down. That's pretty close to configured. I want to choose this as insert trigger and change the text on this button to just be insert. And now that I've done that, what I'm going to do here is go into this array tag for the grid values, and we'll call this insert. Let's see, come up with a different name. We'll call this machine, and we'll even abbreviate here machine E, and put a value in here of 5555, and change this to be yes.bmp from no. And now when I run this, so that was machine E 5555, yes. I'll save this and I'll run. We can see the grid object right now doesn't have those objects. I'll insert. I probably need a reload here, but I don't have that reload tag. Let's go and configure that. And come down here. I'm just going to reuse that reload tag that I had already tied on that other button. Click on OK. And, well, since I refreshed, it already had it in here. So let's go ahead and insert another one. Click on Reload, and you can see that it's going to keep the same values in there and insert another line. So I can keep inserting here. And eventually, when I reload, you'll see that I'll eventually get the scroll bar. I probably wouldn't insert a bunch of the same lines, but the data could change in that tag, and then you insert, and then you can insert more and more and more into here. Now this should have also, I haven't tried this, but this should have also written back out to that text file. We can see it's keeping updated up there. So a couple of more things to point out before we get out of the grid video. We're not going to cover the database source just yet. We'll do that when we get into the databases. But let's see, some other things that we have here. Auto refresh after insert trigger. I put the reload button in there, but we could have done the auto refresh in here. And the concatenate label for the picture, according to the help, the way that this works is you put the label name that's shown here under the columns, an underscore in front of the picture name, and you can use that as the name of the file name. So there's some different uses for the grid object, and some other quick things to point out that we can, in fact, use the column names with the labels with string tags enclosed in curly brackets, so that you could dynamically change these column names during runtime. So that even sets it up to be more flexible. It's already a very flexible object, but I can set that up to be even more flexible. Hopefully you got a lot out of this video. If you have any questions, comments, that you'd like to give us any feedback maybe, please feel free to contact us at info@indusoft.com. Thanks, and have a great day.